All right, so human brain weighs about 3 pounds, is surrounded by cerebrospinal fluid that lessens its weight, has 3 membranes covering it called the meninges, and there's the dura mater, the tough mother, the arachnoid, and the pia mater, and those keep the fluid in there, and they also give a little protection for the brain itself. You have to know certain parts of the brain and their main function, and I'll go through that now. So the main big part here is called the cerebrum. That is the thinking part of the brain. It has lobes. You have the frontal lobe here. It goes from about here to here. That's primarily for motor movement. The prefrontal cortex up here is decision making. It's the last part of the brain to develop. But for your intensive purposes, if I point to frontal lobe, you're going to put motor movement. The parietal lobe goes to about here. It's on either side under the parietal bone. That's for sensory. So you actually have a part in there called the Wernicke's area. The Wernicke's area, if you look at a piece of pie, will tell you, oh, that pie, I like it, it tastes good. It can then send that information to Broca's, and Broca's is up here in the frontal lobe, and Broca's will say, yeah, I know what that's called, that's banana cream pie, and I'm going to be able to say it then. So the very back, sometimes if you fall and hit the very back of your skull, you'll see stars, and that's because the occipital lobe is back there, and the occipital lobe is for vision. The temporal lobe over the ear here is primarily for hearing. Parietal lobe does a lot with sense of smell too. There's another lobe called the insula. You'll learn that in AP1. You can see the olfactory lobes here for smell. This is your optic nerve number 1. You'll need to know that optic nerve. Cranial nerve number 1 is your olfactory. This cranial nerve number 2 is your optic, which is right here for vision. You see this little part of the brain here? This is your cerebellum. If we divide the brain in half, you can see the tree of life there, the arbor vitae. In the cerebellum, that is for balance, muscle coordination. It's part of the brain. If you drink alcohol, it pretty well shuts down. That's why people stagger and lose their balance. You can see your spinal cord comes up, and then this is your medulla oblongata. Your medulla oblongata controls various systems to keep you alive, like your heart beating and your lungs breathing. There's a breathing center there. This is the pons. It's a relay station. And this is called your midbrain, another relay station here. You have what's called the diencephalon that has 3 parts. And I'm going to show you this because this has a pituitary gland on it right there. This little P-shaped gland. It's supposed to be hanging down. Got kind of squished up there. There's your pituitary gland. So above it is the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus is for homeostasis of the body. First of all, it controls the pituitary gland. It makes 2 hormones that are secreted and stored by the posterior pituitary. But the hypothalamus maintains homeostasis. So this is where you regulate water balance in the body. Thirst centers here, hunger centers are here, making sure you stay alive. Then the thalamus is here. I usually don't have you guys learn what the thalamus does. And then the epithalamus houses a gland here, number 23. That is the pineal gland that secretes melatonin. When it gets dark out, you secrete melatonin, and that makes you tired. and want to go to sleep. That's why on a cloudy day when the sun's not up, or in winter time, you're more tired in the morning because you're still making melatonin, because the body thinks it's still dark out, because it is, and you have to decrease melatonin amounts to wake up. There are all kinds of what we call ventricles that actually house the fluid in the brain, the cerebral spinal fluid, as it circulates. This part of the brain here in white, this is called the corpus callosum. See it better, a little better here. That integrates the right and left hemispheres. You've heard how some people are right brain dominant, some are left brain dominant. We want to coordinate the two hemispheres. You can tell simply if you're right or brain dominance by taking your hands and putting them together. One way, the thumb feels natural on top. If you switch, it doesn't feel as good. So the thumb that's on top that feels normal, my left thumb's on the top here, that means I'm left brain dominant. What does that mean? It means usually that people that are left brain dominant like things to be more sequential. They're better at math usually. They tend to, it's more the logical part of the brain. Right brain people tend to be more artistic, more spatial, more random learners. But again, most people are good at coordinating the two hemispheres. Otherwise, we'd have problems. And I just want to make sure that I got all the parts, Arbor Vitae. So that's it for the brain.